Thank you for joining us. My name is Dr. Dustin J. Byrd. I am the founder and editor-in-chief of Ekpyrosis Press, a fairly new publishing house started in 2019. And today I'm joined by Dr. Sachin Namdeo Gadekar, who is going to talk to us about his new book entitled Between Cultural Memory and Post-Colonialism, a study of African and South Asian novels. So thank you very much, Dr. Gadekar, for being with us today. How are you doing?
Yeah, my pleasure, my pleasure.
Very good. So why don't we have you introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a little bit about you, where you're at, what you work on, and things like that. What's your academic background? Where are you at now?
Good evening, everyone. From India, I'm Dr. Sachin Gadekar. Teaching as an associate professor in Tuljaram Chaturuchanda College, Baramati. My college is affiliated to Savitribai Phule Pune University, Pune, and I would like to talk about my academic works in short. I did my master in English from Pune University, Pune, and obtained MPhil degree and PhD degree from Savitribai Phule Pune University, Pune in 2017. And the postgraduate diploma in teaching English from the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad. Prestige Books International has recently published my book entitled Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, a Critical Study. And moreover, I have completed 2 research projects sanctioned by BCUD, Pune University, Pune, and Indian Council of Social Science Research, New Delhi, under the IMPRESS scheme by the Government of India. And also I presented papers in national and international seminars and conferences and published in journals and edited volumes. It's really great pleasure and honor for me to present my views on a recently published book by Ekpyrosis Press. And for that, I must thank Dr. Dustin Byrd, who is founder and editor-in-chief, for his valuable support, and his whole team for bringing out this book very beautifully. I must also thank the scholars who are present over here as part of this Zoom discourse, this Zoom meeting. And I hope they will find this discourse useful, and which obviously will generate more fruitful discussion on the book. So over to you, Dustin.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. It's good. I was so very happy that you submitted the book to be published. It's quite an interesting read, with post-colonialism being something that's very important right now. People are talking a lot about it. A lot of scholars are working on this project of decolonizing academia, decolonizing media, and on and on. So it's a very important project, I think, for scholars both in the West and to recognize and to work with this project, but also scholars from other parts of the world who are working on their own home and their own work, to decolonize it and to find some kind of indigenous modernity and things like this. So very fascinating work. I'm very happy to publish this important study. So if you could, Dr. Gadekar, tell me about how you came to study post-colonialism in memory. What is the gist of this work?
Yes. Here I must mention to late Professor Dr. Kumar S. Iyer, whose support, encouragement, and also inspiration brought me to this stage. He taught me, and it was a real privilege to work with him since my undergraduate days. So my time with him helped me to grow in many ways. Actually, he taught me Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, which hold my attention and attracted me towards this post-colonial studies as one of the most popular areas of teaching and research. I must also express my gratitude to Dr. Kamlakar Bhatt, who introduced me to this wonderful world of cultural memory studies and post-colonial literature. In fact, most of my ideas took a preliminary shape owing to several discussions with him. And also, the subject of this book took shape while I was working with him on my MPhil research. And one more person I must not forget to mention here, who is an emeritus professor and writer, Dr. R. Raj Rao, for his guidance, for his comments at different stages of research and writing, helped me a lot. So there were, many other people who taught me and also introduced me to this wonderful and beautiful world of post-colonial studies.
Nice, very good. So why did you write this book? Why a study of African and South Asian novels? What are the connections between these two worlds in their post-colonial condition?
It's not a matter of deficiency in post-colonial studies. Here, basically, I'm not concerned with post-colonialism only, but I'm more concerned about its repercussions on the native cultural practices and its impact on life of people, and significantly their reverberations as a sort of protest to the colonial dominance or its hangover during or either after political freedom. Many literary and cultural studies scholars, they have commented on the contribution of literature to the advancement of historical knowledge and the consolidation of a sense of community. A significant amount of literature also has drawn attention to the ways in which post-colonial literatures challenged colonial discourses and provided a refuge for collective or popular memory. But here, the present study, I think, may contribute to the fields of post-colonial studies and memory studies because it studies literary works as a counter discourse in the post-colonial context by bringing together authors from three geographical areas in Anglophone literature. It also combines cultural memory studies and post-colonial literary studies, and carries out an analysis of specific texts with the specific focus on rupture of various practices due to colonialism, and significantly the revival and reconstruction of different practices. So because of the experiences of colonialism, African and Asian societies, they address the rupture in their cultural memories through a process of cultural revival, which is especially visible in the literary text. So this study can play a significant role in disseminating ideas relating to identities. It studies the regional traditions in different cultures and also raises an issue about the possibility of any collaborative effort or theoretical framework for the study of different cultures together. So this study tries to find out some common roots by addressing a few historical and political issues such as the traumatic and controversial pasts like colonialism or partition, and cultural differences, while emphasizing and enhancing the diversity of practices. So this book also discusses the ways by which past has been recaptured in literature and especially in the selected novels, and describes different paradigms which include, different techniques and methods of dealing with past, which are used and developed by several scholars in this field. And also it is found that, some try to find the conceptual mastery, and some tend to be employing pragmatic techniques for remembering the past. So this paradigm may include the art of memory, the encyclopedic representation of knowledge, and the narrative reproduction of the past. So the field of memory studies become, international and interdisciplinary in its origin. It's also, in its interest and scope, uh, in historiographic foundation. It is very popular field. And, nowadays the media presence or broadcasts a great number of programs, movies, documentaries, which are largely concerned with the major significant historical events, and many books concerning the subject of memory and remembrance have been written, which examine uh, individual as well as social patterns of remembrance of historical events. So these were some points in my mind before I went for this study.
Now you've got four different novels that you're working with, right? And so you have Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart, Ngugi wa Thiong'o's A Grain of Wheat, Bapsi Sidhwa's Ice Candy Man, and in Rohinton's Mistry, Such a Long Journey, right? Those are the four novels that you analyze in the book. And these are all pretty popular books. I've heard of, here in the West, in the Midwest of of America, I've heard 3 of those books before, and have read 2 of them before reading your book. And what is it about these 4 particular books that make it so clear, or make it so poignant that you can use them for a book on memory and post-colonialism?
Actually, this study investigates the textual interweaving of the cultural memory discourse carried out by the post-colonial writers. And to meet this goal, the critical analysis is narrowed down, which presents a close reading of the 4 novels. As you told, it's Things Fall Apart by Nigerian writer Chinua Achebe, A Grain of Wheat by Kenyan writer Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Ice Candy Man by Pakistani writer Bapsi Sidhwa, and Such a Long Journey by Indian Canadian writer Rohinton Mistry. It's true that the novelists are from the 1950s, 1960s, 1980s, 1990s, and these novels have been examined by a significant number of scholars. Also, this study, presents a great deal of research which can be found in several books about memory studies. But this particular book analyzes narrative methods which raise several complex issues regarding the varied nature of memory and how it is used as a performative cultural practice, and places the concept of cultural memory in the post-colonial context. As you rightly asked, that what unites the 2 Asian and 2 African novels in this book. The interesting part is that All the selected novels, they are part of the Commonwealth literature, which represents the countries once ruled or colonized by the British or the European colonizers. And for all the novels, the socio-economic and the political influence on human life is a significant base, which has been handled in a very subtle way, in a subtle manner. And in the study of these novels, we need to understand the two movements, namely the colonization of land and also colonization of people. So the writers from the African and the Asian continents, they are linked, they are studied together to evaluate the metaphysical, social, economic, and political concerns, and how the important thing is how do they negotiate this phenomena in relation to colonialism and post-colonialism. However, it is impossible, as to cover the broad field of cultural memory within the framework of one issue. But here, the novel selected for this study, they address different historical examples or issues from colonial, post-colonial memories to partition memories of Africa and South Asia. These novels also highlight the role of literature in shaping collective memories by providing common points of references against which new positions can be established. And they also indicate the potential of literature to destabilize the established memories and try to emphasize on the native culture, which leads to the formation of cultural identity. So here, the historical novels by Sidhwa, Ngugi, and Achebe, and in a limited sense, Mistry, they commemorate the earlier stages of colonial, post-colonial, and national history. They also discuss a couple of contemporary issues and conflicts which emphasize on the cultural power of fictional sites of memory. And here, this book has limited the discussion to the writers from Africa and South Asia because they have colonial experiences. They demonstrate the terrible socio-economic and political conditions of their respective countries, which have very complex issues of exploitation, marginalization, slavery, and also betrayal. So a single formula of cultural memory and historiography is not adequate, I know, to describe the novels because they represent. But here, another purpose of selecting these novels is to bring together different identities, different cultures, and this transnational study of cultural memory can help also, to preserve and respect local and national identities, which are conceived as an important steps towards the formation of new identities that are built upon the shared and common values with due respect to local traditions. While pursuing the South Asian and African identities, through the patterns of cultural memory, always there is a risk of homogenization and, melting of all differences. But still, it is important to preserve the identity and, precarious cultural heritage of each nation while unifying them. It should not assimilate in the process of comparative study of these different nations. And for this purpose, the term cultural memory in relation to the study of different cultures and identities represented through selected novels is used or considered as very open or dynamic, which is under constant discussion as a shared set of values, and that can be renegotiated with appropriate research. It has been perceived that all nations in the respective backdrops in which the selected novels are set, they have different identities which are rooted in different national realities. And all the selected authors, they have their own cultures which form their identity with their with other culture. So it is also argued by Gleason that we live in a very fragmented diversity, and the cultural interaction helps to bring all together on some common levels. So here the selected novels, they act as literary sites of cultural memory. In the process of establishing and maintaining national culture, it can be called an intentional creation of national identity. There are many witnesses, there are many sources, customs, traditions, places, urban sites relating to the events, situations, and people which play a significant role in culture making of the nation. So here, the important investigation of places such as landscape or urban sites, different communities of communities of different kinds, to find out the ways in which memories are tied to places or other sites in their unique forms. So this interplay of places and memory is a useful tool for the study of various communal levels, such as regional, national, and global, as an effective medium for exploring the communal identity. Now, if you see, it is quite evident that all the selected writers, they share a very common obligation to their society and also to their culture. Here, Chinua Achebe or Ngugi or Bapsi, Sidhwa or Rohinton, Mistry, they might have written with different point of views, or they might have different purposes, but the political, the social, economic, cultural issues they dealt with in their own way. But this albeit representation reflect different shades of the spectrum of cultural memories. So here they share a common concern for their people and also culture, which are greatly influenced by colonialism and the traumatic experiences. They depict people with their own characteristic features. And these authors are significant for their aesthetic sense as well, because of their faithful depiction of consciousness of people in a very appropriate setting through the authentic and very realistic characters. So the issues of colonialism and post-colonialism, from the sense of oppressor or from the sense of oppressed, unite them all and strengthen the ideology of weaving, the world and culture in their own image. So all the four writers write differently, but they provide a common ground of colonial or post-colonial heritage and thematic history. And therefore, the selection shows diversity of post-colonial writings, which calls for analysis from the cultural point of view. In case of Achebe and Ngugi, the connection is quite natural and immediately obvious. But in case of Mistry and Bapsi Sidhwa, this connection is a little bit difficult to find, such obvious and immediate direct connection, because they belong to another obvious group. But it is observed that they have cultural concerns which investigate the issue of origins in other ways and depict different social worlds of the 20th century in South Asia and its ancestry. So it does not provide a neat correspondence, but draw attention to cultural memories, and that could allow readers to piece together their own comparison and contrast. They also raise, various issues like ancestry, indigenous culture, history, landscape, language, oral and cultural traditions, partitions, gender disparities, settlement, identity or nationalism, multiculturalism, disruption of the notion of nation and migration, which all are concerned with disturbances, and as a result of colonialism, as a result of partition, or as a result of displacement. And therefore, I just studied all these four novels together. Actually, it was very difficult for me to select writers, belonging to different periods, but I came to this common base where colonialism is the common platform, and they are raising different aspects of cultural memory studies, and they have very keen concern about the loss of their own tradition, and they are little bit concerned about it. And therefore this was the reason why I selected these two writers from Africa and two from South Asia.
Yeah, interesting. It's very interesting. It always, in talking about post-colonialism, post-colonial studies, in cultural memory, for me, it's always a question of, how far do you go, when you're looking back and reconstructing what we used to be before colonization, before the massive rupture, as you were talking about earlier, that colonialism, imperialism was to much of the world. When you go back into time, back into history to remember this stuff, it's not a sense what I think what a lot of people think casually, that it's, okay, we're going to try to erase the colonial period. We're going to try to not only decolonize, but to completely uproot anything that came out of colonialism, and in sort of, in an anachronistic way, go backwards. You know what I mean? We're going to go back to the way it used to be, the status quo ante, for instance, as opposed to saying it's a critical determinate negation, to use a Hegelian term, a critical look at the past, wherein that which is important for our identity, who we are, the spirit, whatever it is of the nation, to bring that back to the forefront, and other things go into the past to remain in the past. So it's a determinate negation where certain things are brought to the forefront, certain things are remembered, certain things are revivified, if you will, and other things are left behind. And so I always wonder, when we do post-colonial studies, if we can ever find any good out of colonization, right? I mean, that's almost like heretical to say, and I know I'll probably get some comments. How could you say anything was good out of colonization? You know what I mean? But I look at history from a Hegelian perspective, where something good can come out of the tragedy, right? So, I mean, I don't want to throw you into that lion's den right there, and so you tell me what's good came out of the British people's colonization. You know what I mean? But am I right in saying that it's some kind of determinate negation where we look back and try to rescue and bring back to the forward a future-oriented remembrance? Am I right on that?
Yeah, it's true. Uh, yeah, just let me answer your question. Yeah, here, this is a very popular and expanding force which continuously attract, readers towards a couple of issues like globalization, transnationalism, diaspora or queer studies, and many more areas of common, concerns. Yeah, there are a couple of social, cultural, and psychological aspects. Mainly the issue of identity created in the process of decolonization. So it has come out of the Anglophone purview outside the post colonies, and it reassesses the nation state. The notion of language or the notion of race, religion, sexuality, and also a couple of issues related to the environment and the idea of future. So there are, both ways you can say, good things because of the, European colonizers, natives came across. But I personally feel compared to good things, there are a couple of, important things the native people missed. And for them, this is a very bigger loss. And this kind of, colonial ideology, it still continues, it still haunts their mind. And, it has created a couple of different problems. It has created a couple of different issues which need to be addressed with different theoretical framework. And in that sense, we could say that this relation of cultural memory and post-colonial experiences is very significant. In regards to its relation, we could say that they are very much conscious about their own identity. They are trying to revive it. They are trying to preserve it, and through different mediums, through different forms, they are reviving it. They are bringing it forth. So this is this is a sort of a kind of new realization we find in mostly the novels that I have selected for my study.
Yeah, is there question of for instance, I just did a work on Syed Hussein Alatas's the notion of the captive mind, that somehow there's among writers, among intellectuals and scholars within the colonized world, that in many ways they still remain captive to the colonizers. They remain, as you talked about, to the ideology of the colonizers. So anything that is native to the land, to Africa, to Asia, whatnot, is somehow inferior because the Western world is superior. So we have to somehow read Western works, and we have to use Western concepts, and on like this. And somehow that ideology is so saturated into the consciousness that it's almost impossible to get out. And so, in some ways, this post-colonialism is an attempt, I think, to break free of that captive mind, right? To as you said, look at these identity forming cultural inheritance that you have in India, in the subcontinent, that you have in parts of the world that have been colonized by Western colonial powers. Now, do you still see this concept of the captive mind or captive mind scholars in Indian literature today?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. There is still a captive mind syndrome in writers in formerly colonized countries. Its ill effect and repercussions are seen on life of people. It is also seen in their practices and culture as well. Here, in case of Africa or Asia, the consequences are seen very prominently because people have still, strong sense of loss. Also, the period, about this novel, the period in which these novels are set, obviously have very close connection to imperial rule over people and their land. So in case of Asia or in case of Africa, um, argued by Ngugi wa Thiong'o also, that we live in the world that is influenced by the constant long intellectual shadow of the European Empire. So the study of these novels shows a greater influence of colonialism and how it affected the cultural identity of the colonized country, uh, who are representative of different cultures. The novels revive cultural past, they reconstruct the collective memory, as a way of cultural revival, which is visible in the literary text. For example, here, in case of Chinua Achebe's novel, Things Fall Apart, which preserves, movements of the first intercultural encounter, as well as conflict between colonizers and the natives of Africa. And for the study of Achebe's novel, the notion of cultural trauma is a theoretical frame to understand the development of collective identity. So this cultural trauma, it develops the feeling of loss or the feeling of threat to native culture, particularly among Igbo people, especially Okonko, and generate the conflict between African natives and the European colonizers. So it becomes a struggle for one's own existence in the land of Africa with different goal. And here Achebe's concerns for cultural dislocation as well as for the colonial encounter, their far-reaching consequences on human life, is a limited point of view, but it mainly focuses on the greater concern of being an African, and not by any means an unequivocal celebration of the tribal culture. So the novel focuses on different disjunctive, thematic concerns that contradict the discourse of colonial ideology on the one hand, and African community in its moments of historical crisis on the other hand. So here Achebe sheds light on the pre-colonial Igbo society. He also focuses on different values of Igbo culture and gives an insight into everyday experiences of Igbo people. But in case of Ngugi or Thiong'o, he represents cultural memories of Africa and more precisely of Kenya in a grain of weight in the backdrop of colonialism and post-colonialism. So this novel, it stresses his radical shift in representation of Kenyan history. And he describes the history, he describes the culture, and also the politics of Gikyu society, and portrays the ethos of African people. But the interesting issue here is, how Ngugi negotiates this delicate balance between individual and community or collective memories. So this novel portrays of struggle of peasants for land, identity, which are lost by them in the process of modern development. And here, like Achebe, Ngugi shares the feeling of urgency and also concern for society which are threatened by fragmentation. But here, much of African writing from the early narratives focus on and criticize the discursive colonial practice. The African writers, including Achebe and Ngugi, they tried to restore the African culture and historiography, which was completely denied by colonialism. So in words of, Achebe himself, it's a process of returning to self. And, it is reconstituting a shattered community, aiming to restore the sense and fact of community from the colonial pressure. But in case of, Chinua, Achebe, Ngugi, Thiong'o, or Bapsi, Sidhwa, Rohinton, Mistry, they describe the painful memories of colonialism, post-colonialism, and also the memories of partition, memories of war, and cultural loss of the marginalized people. There are mostly the memories of trauma which has influenced their life and cultural existence. The literary creation or revival of various traditions and cultural values, is a way of finding voice for their existence and protecting their identity in a very volatile situation, which has been badly affected by colonialism and its aftermath, and also the religious fundamentalism, especially in case of Rohinton Mistry's, novel. So this is an experience not only of the individuals, but it is also the experience of many who feel pain after the loss of their own culture and values of life. So these writers from Asia, writers from Africa, they evaluate the social, political, cultural concerns. They discuss the phenomena of cultural memory studies, in relation to colonialism, post-colonialism, and they depict how colonial past, the post-colonial present of their respective countries, and different problems which are unleashed in one's country before and after freedom. So they are very much conscious about the hard-earned freedom from the colonizers at the cost of the sacrifice of their elder countrymen, at the sacrifice of their own people. So they built, they attempt to build the consciousness of their respective countries and its people in the light of present. They seek to understand society in the light of traditional values, which often confront with the modern development. And in case of, all the novels that selected as a part of the study, one of the serious concerns of the new nations, is the loss of traditional values and their struggle for survival under their own rulers. So this is a, sort of colonial hangover. Many things have drastically changed in the modern development, but still the hangover of traumatic colonial or, partition experiences cast an abiding influence on human consciousness. And these writers, through remembering the cultural memories, through material or non-material means, directly or indirectly, try to regain and establish the belief in their, unique culture and identity. So they depict the tragedy of people, as well as culture, which makes us compare the traditional society and their values with the modern day scenario, to note, the imbalance and the change in the priority. So this degradation, leads to violation of the code of conduct, and the common practices subsequently to the loss of their identity. And through these novels, the authors, they attempt to revive such cultural values and practices which are unique, with the purpose to project them in a new light. And all the four, writers, they try to restore the cultural identity of their respective society through rediscovery of the past with present. And they also focus on modern reality, which is characterized by various social evils, such as inequality, betrayal, murder, injustice, and corruption. So they depict the cultural transition and the process of forging a new identity. And these novels, they mark, very decisive steps towards the cultural transition, forging identities, and they revive the hitherto forgotten feature of their own culture, their own heritage, folklore, mythology, and also fertile oral tradition and the roots which subsequently form the cultural identity.
Do you think that globalization has sped up this process of post-colonialism, of returning to the self, of looking back and into history, considering just how disruptive globalization can be to traditional society, traditional cultures? So is it imbued an even more severe sense of urgency into doing this type of work? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. Just yeah, I want to read particular lines. Yeah, in the present century, industrial growth has coincided with the disappearance of peasant culture and collective memory. So there is a kind of a fundamental collapse of memory, and the object of historical study in the movement of democratization or decolonization. So there is a great need of revival of history and culture. It's not only those who have been marginalized in traditional history, they need to recover their buried past, but there are different ethnic, social groups, established groups, minorities, scholars, intellectuals. They feel the need to search and locate their identity, locate their origin. As Pierre Nora, he has observed that at the end of the 19th century, when a decisive blow to traditional history was felt, especially the disintegration of rural life, memory appeared at the center of philosophical thought. So there is a decisive shift of memory from history to psychology, and from the social to the individual, from objective message to its subjective reception. And this memory studies and post-colonialism are very popular and increasingly areas of research and teaching. Both are great interdisciplinary and international appeal. They are widely taught in most of the universities across the globe. But earlier, the discussion was largely concerned with collective memory, and also identifying the sites of memory as an act of remembering the memories of the group. But nowadays, the sites of memory as an act of remembering the memories of the group has been shifted to the cultural process. by which memories are, shared in the first place. So this, concept are not significant because of their rapid growth and, publication of specific national, social, religious, or, family memories since the late 1980s. But this, as Astrid Earl argued, that provides an overview of the state of the art in this emerging field, and it synthesizes its different research traditions. Here, the two, African novelists, they highlight the cultural tradition of native Africans and, share a common cultural distrust of imperialist intentions. So while sympathizing the utter helplessness of the natives under the colonizers, and later under their own race as rulers after winning freedom. So they also, differ in particular respect, and they attack their imperfections, which is governed more by love than detachment. And they also criticize the native rulers who adopt the Western methods of corruption and rule with no sympathy for their own poor and, patriotic people. So they juxtapose cultural memory of Africa, which with contemporary times in their countries after, attaining independence, to regain the lost or forgotten honor and cultural traditions. Whereas in case of Bapsi, Sidhwa, it includes haunting images of historical events and the national trauma of partition. And mainly the novel deals with the gaps in the historical records. The gaps that she discovers are the wounds in the memory itself, the scars of a trauma that resist representation. Long, after deeply destructive events are articulated in the framework of a literary text. So in case of Sidhwa's, Ice Can Demand, she imagines, and the imaginative and literary supplements to historical memory is not just feeling of the gap, but marking of it. And she seeks to make connections with the social and cultural life of the Muslims community, and presents very impulsive, determined anecdote and, conflicting account of events which led to the specific end. And she presents with a very surge of anger and helplessness the political, religious versions of the history, by placing us amid madness and crime, following partition. So it is, particularly set in Pakistan, which has a very strong sense of place and community, and also a very important historical consciousness. Whereas in case of Mistry, he documents a few Parsi beliefs. And in Mistry's novel, you could see there is a strong sense of loss, which in a broader sense can be linked to the decrease in number of Parsi people in India. Here, Mistry through his writings puts straight the record of Parsi culture, which is linked to the dwindling Parsi population. So he transforms cultures into a fictional form and explores the cultural and social realities of time. He also urges for different cultural and religious rituals, but does not idealize the Parsi community and their rituals, nor does he makes any clear-cut segregation between the Parsis and the rest. He also makes fun of the Orthodox Parsi people. He criticizes the rituals of Parsi people which exploit them. And he shows the fragmentation of various ideas and family and society as well. So this novel, it mainly focuses on the community and their current pitiable struggle in the post-colonial India, where both their identity and existence are challenged by Hindu nationalism. So here they feel that there is a need to address these kinds of ruptures, and mostly these things have strongly influenced by colonialism, partition, and number of political issues erupted in these respective countries.
Interesting. The quick question, we're coming to the end of our discourse here, and clearly post-colonial studies, as we've said before, is a massive undertaking right now, and both in academia and in reality on the ground, in cultures, in governments, in societies around the world. In many ways, as academics, we participate in that by formulating theories, by evaluating that which is tremendously important to preserve, to revivify, to bring back to life, and also that which can go to the dustbin of history. So my question for you is, what's the future of post-colonial studies? Where do you see it going in light of the massive amount of pressures that we have in the world through globalization? But where's the future of it in academia, and as well as on the ground in places like Asia and Africa?
Yes, absolutely. I agree with you. The post-colonial studies, it's very popular and very expanding force, which continuously attract researchers, scholars, and also a significant amount of literature has drawn attention to the ways in which these post-colonial literatures challenged colonial discourses and provided a refuge for collective or popular memory. There are several masterpieces like Edward Said's Orientalism, The Empire Writes Back. They put forth the post-colonial culture, the post-invasion narratives, and the early mapping while merging different concerns with present trends. Here I would like to mention a very important book. The title of the book is The Future of Post-Colonial Studies, edited by Chantal Zibus. In this book, in 5 parts, she put forth different aspects of post-colonial studies, particularly in French-speaking area, its reception in Italy, and also the future linguistic approaches to African literature, conversion, identity and resistance in colonial and post-colonial space, fundamentalism, greening in contemporary Arabic literature, and also queering and the utopian notion of transgendered nation, imperial diversity and war, trauma, and also post-humanism. Frankly speaking, I'm not an authority to talk about the future course of the post-colonial studies, but I feel that it shall not be, an anticipatory discourse. It must represent experiences as the driving energy, which must address issues like power, issues like politics, issues like religion, culture, and the colonial hegemony more comprehensively in the post-colonial context, without restricting it to the conflict between the West and the third world countries. So instead of putting them in the box and making them fight against each other, it shall focus on the power nexus, hegemonic control, inequality, cultural dominance, nationalism, and identity politics within communities at the local and national level as well. So instead of making them, opponent of each other, one should identify a couple of such, issues raised during and after the colonialism. Moreover, there shall be an indigenous theoretical framework that shall be developed, to address the problems and the process of decolonization. The available Western concepts are not enough to address the motifs and themes like cultural rupture and the colonial dominance, and also the racial inequalities of the colonizers in the present context. The problem is we criticize Westerns by using their own concepts. And this is very ironic. So the concepts developed by the post-colonial writers are quite connected with oppressors and oppressed. So it must address the political and cultural independence of the formerly colonized people in a very politically free nation. And a number of new issues are emerging and addressed by in recent publications brought out by a number of publishers across the globe.
Well, thank you, Dr. Gadekar. It's been a wonderful discourse, and I'm hoping everybody will be able to take what we've talked about here today and then go out and buy themselves a copy of your most wonderful book, Between Cultural Memory and Post-Colonialism, a study of African and South Asian novels. It's been an excellent discourse. I've learned a lot, and I'm glad we've been able to do this today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Dustin Byrd, for arranging this Zoom discourse. And I must not forget all viewers and the scholar participants for their engagement in the discussion. It was really brainstorming discussion for me also, and I hope it will create interest among readers. As always, insightful suggestions and comments are welcome. So once again, thank you very much, and have a great time to all, and hope we will meet personally sometime somewhere in future.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll do it in India or America or somewhere in between.
Yes, absolutely. We would love to welcome you here in India.
Nice.